This is Electric Universe Eyes, and today I'm going to narrate The Great Comet Venus by David Talbott, 1997, section titled Venus and Holy War. A powerful conjunction of Venus symbolism and comet symbolism will be seen in the vast tribal wars and conquests that fed the growth of empires in Mesoamerica, a conjunction that will only grow in significance as we find the same nexus of symbols in other major cultures as well. Around the world, comets were seen as harbingers of devastating invasion, war, and conquest. A comet, according to the Chinese, could mean that there are uprisings and war continues for several years. When a comet travels into the constellation Taurus, in the middle of the double month, blood is shed and dead bodies lie on the ground. Within 3 years, the emperor dies and the country is in chaos. The Roman poet Tibullus cites the comet as the evil sign of war. Pliny, treating comets in his Natural History, tells us they bring war and commotion, while the Greek mathematician and astronomer Ptolemy associates them with foreign invasion. The 3rd century Christian writer Origen saw the comet as heralding war and the collapse of dynasties. Centuries later, 1011, Biertfurth's manual lists war as one of the disastrous effects of a comet's appearance. The extraordinary power of the mythic tradition will explain why many of early history's most brutal wars had affixed to them the appearance of a comet, even in cases in which the actual arrival of a comet may be in doubt. A comet and shooting stars are said to have appeared before the Battle of Pharsalus in central Greece, heralding Caesar's defeat of Pompey. Josephus mentions in his History of the Jews that a comet in the form of a sword hung over Jerusalem for a whole year, foretelling the destruction of the city in the reign of the Emperor Vespasian. The belief persisted in medieval and later ages, writes Theodore Gaster. A comet heralded the Norman conquest of Britain in 1066. Disasters suffered by the Christians at the hand of the Turks in 1456 were popularly attributed to the appearance of a comet. In 1456, a comet described as having a fan-shaped tail like that of a peacock is said to have stretched across half the sky. With the Turkish army at the gates of Belgrade, Pope Calixtus III feared a domino effect from a Mohammedan victory. Thus, a Vatican historian wrote, "A hairy and fiery star made an appearance for several days, and mathematicians declared that there would follow great calamity. Calixtus ordered prayers, beseeching God that if this meant impending evils for mankind, God would turn them all upon the Turks, the enemies of Christendom." The Zulu of South America also say that a comet brings war. The same portentous significance of the comet seems to have prevailed in the Americas. In 1835, the warrior chief, Osceola, leader of the Seminole tribe in Florida, saw an appearance of Halley's Comet as an omen, and called on his people to launch a war against white settlers. The Seminoles overwhelmed the army garrison at Fort King and killed every last soldier. Osceola personally scalped the fort's commander, General Wiley Thompson. In the light of the general tradition, the retrospective accounts of Mesoamerican chroniclers, remembering that a comet preceded the Spanish invasion, take on greater meaning for us. The motif is strikingly familiar in an Aztec poem. "I foresaw, being a Mexican, that our rule began to be destroyed. I went forth weeping that it was to bow down and be destroyed. Let me not be angry that the grandeur of Mexico is to be destroyed. The smoking stars gather together against it." One of the principles I intend to establish in this series of articles is that, in the earlier expressions of cometary imagery, the fiery star did not just herald war, it was itself an active agent of celestial upheaval. Originally, the flaming sphere of the comet is hurled into the midst of a great conflagration in the sky. Of course, the peaceful celestial visitors of a later age could never achieve the violent role of the prototype, and over time this would only accentuate the distance between archetype and symbol. Originally, the comet shook heaven and earth, summoning celestial armies and inspiring a clash of opposing forces in the sky. Latin poets seem to have remembered the tradition well when, on the death of Caesar, they sought to portray a recurrence of the world-threatening tempest. When Caesar died, Virgil recounted, "The sun veiled his shining face, and an evil age dreaded eternal night." Then Germany heard the clash of armor fill the sky. The Alps quaked with unwanted shocks. Moreover, a voice was heard of many among silent groves, crying aloud, and phantoms pallid in wonderful wise were seen when night was dim. Never elsewhere did more lightnings fall from clear skies or ghastly comets so often blaze. The poet here is asking history to accommodate a more ancient tradition, in which the clash of armor, the cries of heaven, the appearance of phantoms, as in the Mexican counterpart, and the bursts of lightning all accompanied the appearance of the great comet and its retinue, the chaos hordes. Of an ancient tradition that Athens was decimated by a comet, the poet Manilius recorded, "Such are the disasters which the glowing comets oft proclaim. Death comes with these celestial torches, which threaten earth with the blaze of pyres unceasing. Since heaven and nature's self are stricken and seem doomed to share men's tomb, wars too the fires portend, and sudden insurrection, and arms uplifted in stealthy treachery, when, in their wars with barbarous Germany, the enemy made away with the Roman commander Verus. The poet was quick to assert the comet's presence, for it is the archetype, the great comet, that grants meaning to the symbol, the devastating war. Then did menacing lights burn in every quarter of the skies. Nature herself waged war with fire, marshaling her forces against us and threatening our destruction. That the great wars of early civilizations had a ritual character and purpose is often stated, though the connection with remembered tumult in the sky is rarely confronted. One of the underlying attributes of ritual is its commemorative function, repeating exemplary actions originally performed by gods and celestial heroes, and cataclysmic moments in the biographies of the gods. The motive was announced repeatedly by the warrior kings, who saw themselves as extending the glory of the ancestral gods. The gods desired that their deeds be remembered. Remembering through reenactment was thus the essential nature of ritual combat. It is significant, therefore, that the great wars of early nations in their ritualistic aspect involved a deliberate repetition of great noise and havoc, endlessly blended with the motives of sacrifice, since in the general mythic tradition, sacrifice and war belong to one and the same cosmic sequence. In Olmec times, according to Carrasco, war was the place where the jaguars roar, quote, where feathered war bonnets have about like foam in the waves, end quote. The original reference is not to a terrestrial engagement, but to the contest of the gods, in which jaguar warriors, including Quetzalcoatl's jaguar form, engaged each other on the celestial battlefield. The great havoc of that conflagration meant nothing other than the fruitful sights and sounds of the cosmic night, the occasion of the god king's own sacrifice, and the letting loose of the chaos powers. The model for both the ritual war and the closely related sacrificial rites was the life of the great initiate Quetzalcoatl, as duly noted by Carrasco. Topiltzin Quetzalcoatl was born into a world of war. According to many primary sources, the gods were periodically at war with one another during the mythic eras. In the vivid creation story of the Historia de los Mexicanos por sus Pinturas, the gods created the Chichimec people in order to gain sacrificial blood through human warfare and the ritual sacrifice of captive warriors. Remembrance through repetition thus honored and satisfied the gods, because it acknowledged and glorified the ordeals of the gods. There is an interesting battlefield account by the Spanish soldier Bernal Diaz del Castillo, depicting a scene in the wake of a Spanish retreat near the Great Temple. A number of Spanish soldiers had been captured alive during the engagement, and the chronicler gazed back at the ensuing spectacle. There was sounded the dismal drum of Huichilobos and many other shells and horns and things like trumpets, and the sound of them was terrifying. And we all looked toward the lofty pyramid where they were being sounded, and saw that our comrades, whom they had captured when they defeated courts, were being carried by force up the steps, and they were taking them to be sacrificed. Sacrifice and war here merge as overlapping symbols, together with the terrifying sounds of a more ancient Holocaust. Through sacrifice and war, the divine ordeals were relived and the nation brought into more intimate correspondence with the gods, thus animating the gods themselves. According to Duran, the Aztec priests periodically approached the rulers, telling them that the gods were famished and wished to be remembered. The rulers then consulted among themselves regarding the hunger of the gods and told their neighbors, the Tlaxcalans, to prepare for war, clearly a ritual occasion with agreed ground rules and calendar. When the men were placed in formation and the troops set in order, the squadrons departed toward the plains of Tepepulco, where the armies met. The whole contest, the entire battle, was a struggle whose aim it was to capture prisoners for sacrifice. At the risk of redundancy, we must emphasize again the necessary distinction between archetype and symbol. The challenge to the investigator is this. The gods demanded sacrifice and remembrance, but the prevailing theoretical framework does not provide a prior event to give sense to the idea. What had occurred in the age of the gods that the gods asked mankind not to forget? According to Floyd Lounsbury, one of the most respected authorities on Mayan religion, the warrior kings synchronized their wars to the movements of Venus. The point is stated more than once by Linda Schell. The appearance of Venus after superior conjunction, when Venus passes behind the sun and disappears from view, was often the occasion of war between Maya cities. Thus, the Maya kings believed that Venus played a tremendous role in war, and it appears that they invoked its assistance, looking for the day augured by Venus as appropriate for battle. But is this not the very role of the comet in the universal lexicon? Archaeoastronomers have come to call the bloody wars sanctioned by Venus the Star War events, a fitting title, since the Venus dragon was the great weapon by which the chaos powers were defeated. Citing studies by leading Mayan experts, Carlson notes that the Maya conducted certain battles, raids, or martial contests timed for significant stations in the Venus cycle, such as first appearance as morning star and evening star. Thus, the Star War events were Venus-regulated. What is there about the speck of light we call Venus that could account for this power over war and warriors? And is it only a coincidence again that Venus, as herald of war, stands in complete alignment with the comet as herald of war? My intent in this series of articles will be not just to demonstrate the full convergence of cometary symbols on Venus, but to unveil the planet's original character as the Great Comet, when it was nothing less than the celestial tempest itself.